Britain has just handed Ukraine something Russia desperately does not want it to have. Not just another batch of missiles, but the technology needed to make one of Ukraine's most powerful long-range weapons itself. The weapon is Storm Shadow, a British version of the Franco-British Scalp cruise missile system that can strike targets hundreds of kilometers away. And now, Britain is allowing Ukraine access to classified information on British-made components so that Kyiv can move forward to producing the weapon on its own soil. For Ukraine, that could mean more freedom to strike deep inside Russia without waiting for every missile to arrive from the West. For Russia, it is a major escalation. Moscow has already accused Britain of adding fuel to the fire and warned that it is gathering information on potential missile production sites and even raised the possibility of attacks on factories supplying weapons to Ukraine. So why has Britain taken this step? And what exactly does Storm Shadow bring to Ukraine? And could this decision actually change the war? The story begins in Kyiv, where Andy Burnham made his first overseas visit as British Prime Minister on Ukraine's Independence Day. The headline announcement was simple but significant. Britain would allow defense company MBDA to release classified information about British components used in the Scalp missile. Scalp is the French name for the missile that Britain calls Storm Shadow. It is an Anglo-French long-range cruise missile designed to hit important targets deep behind enemy lines. Ukraine has already used Storm Shadows against Russian military positions, including command centers, logistic sites, and other heavily protected targets. The missile can travel more than 250 kilometers, depending on the version, and is designed to fly close to the ground before using advanced guidance systems to reach its targets. Unlike many drones, it can carry a large warhead and is particularly suited to striking hardened structures such as bunkers. The problem for Ukraine is that these missiles are expensive, limited in number, and dependent on foreign supplies. And that is exactly where the British decision becomes important. Instead of supplying more missiles, Britain is helping Ukraine build the knowledge needed to eventually make the missiles at home. Ukraine already has a growing domestic drone and missile industry. Its drones can travel hundreds of kilometers into Russia and have already struck oil facilities, warehouses, and other strategic targets. But drones generally carry smaller payloads and are easier for Russian air defenses to detect and intercept. Storm Shadow offers something completely different. A heavier, more precise weapon designed to destroy high-value and heavily protected targets. Ukraine has repeatedly argued that Russian aircraft can launch missiles and glide bombs from deep inside Russia, while Ukrainian forces have often been restricted from striking the bases behind those attacks. Giving Kyiv greater access to long-range weapons could therefore allow it to target airfields, command centers, ammunition depots, and logistic hubs much further from the front. Russia has already moved some aircraft, missiles, and supporting infrastructure in line of the move away from Ukraine because it knew longer-range Western weapons were coming. Ukraine also has limited numbers of Western missiles, meaning the impact depends on how many missiles it can eventually produce. And that is exactly why domestic production could matter much more in the long run. The Kremlin has reacted angrily to the British decision. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has accused Britain of adding fuel to the fire and said Russia was already collecting information about possible missile production facilities. And then came an even more direct warning. Former Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Fedorov said he could not completely rule out semi-military action against Britain. When asked what that meant, he pointed to factories producing drones and missile components for Ukraine. He suggested that such facilities could face attacks or cyber attacks carried out by unknown sources. The warning comes against a backdrop of alleged Russian sabotage operations across Europe, including unexplained fires and explosions at facilities linked to Ukraine's missile supply chain. The fear in London is therefore simply not that Russia could attack Ukraine's future missile factories. It is that the conflict could increasingly spill into Europe through cyber attacks, sabotage, and covert operation. Burnham, however, has refused to back down. When Russia accused Britain of escalating the war, his response was blunt: who started the fire? The biggest impact of the British decision may not be immediately felt. Ukraine is unlikely to start producing large number of Storm Shadows overnight, and the first locally manufactured missiles could take time to enter service. But if Kyiv eventually develops a reliable domestic production line, then the calculation changes. Ukraine would have a greater control over its long-range strike capability and would be less dependent on the stockpiles and political decisions of Western governments. And this is becoming increasingly important as Kyiv faces shortages in other areas, particularly air defenses such as interceptors and Patriot missiles. The UK and its European partners are therefore trying to solve two problems at once. One is giving Ukraine more weapons to strike Russian military infrastructure, and the other is helping Ukraine build an industry capable of producing those weapons itself. There is also another part of the deal that could prove important. Britain has gained access to Ukraine's Avengers AI labs, which contains millions of battlefield images and other data collected during the Russian war. That information could help British researchers develop AI systems for detecting military threats, drones, and potential saboteurs. So this is bigger than just a missile blueprint. It is a part of a broader exchange of military technology between Britain and Ukraine. For Kyiv, it means moving closer to becoming self-sufficient in advanced weapons. For Britain, it means gaining access to some of the most valuable battlefield data generated by modern warfare. And for Russia, it sends a clear message that Western support for Ukraine is not disappearing. The real question now is whether this tech can reach the battlefield quickly enough to make a difference. I'm Vivek Dubey, and you're watching The Times of India.